when the first time that you told me on the phone about the roadie clinic, it was like, oh yeah, like that's they're on like a parallel trajectory about like wanting to like, let's start having like real honest conversations about mental health and the touring community.
Let's address it.
You know, because, you know, like we were saying off camera a few minutes ago, it's like, you know, it's the island of misfit toys, and it's like, you know, like the people that are drawn to end up in this industry is like, you know, it's a very self-selecting demographic that gets funneled into doing, you know, the stuff that we've done and the, you know, the stuff that you're still available to do. I mean, I've been off the road for a long time, but yeah, you get a lot of people from a lot of, you know, crazy backgrounds and people with pretty wild life stories, and a lot of times that what accompanies that is, you know, substance abuse problems and mental health issues, and you know, and then there's just like the ups and downs of like the touring schedules, and like, you know, like I think another thing too that people don't really understand is like, you know, you develop like a sense of community and sometimes even like a sense of family with the people that you're touring with.
Totally.
And then, okay, cool, tour's done, next leg of the tour is like, you know, whatever, like, and then you just like suddenly like you're like ripped away from those people, you know, like, and suddenly it's like, oh, now you're just back home for 6 weeks or whatever, and you're waiting for the next thing to come up and start another tour again. And like there's a lot of like really jagged sort of like just weird ups and downs that people can like emotionally experience when they're doing this kind of work. And
there's
takes a toll.
There's a lot of people. It does take its toll, and there's a lot of people who aren't equipped, don't have the tools and coping mechanisms to deal with those changes and those transitions. I always found it very difficult to transition from the road back home, but much easier to transition from home to the road.
Yeah.
Coming home was always really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And you know, you leave for 6, 8 weeks, whatever, 3 months, and you come back a different person.
Yeah, every single tour changes you.
You change because you are now a culmination of all those experiences that you had in that tour. And think about those experiences, just the shows alone, and all the hardships and challenges that you have to go through, and then all your days off and all the fun that you're having or trying to have, and all the places that you're seeing and all the things that you're doing and all the people that you meet, and you know, when you come back home, you have processed those things, you encompass those things, so you're not the same person that you were when you left. I always had a really difficult time coming home and trying to be the person that my family needed me to be. It was really difficult. We worked it out. You know, it took some hard conversations, and you know, like just getting perspective and really looking at it and putting myself in their shoes and looking at, you know, I mean, I would come home and I'd be wacky, you know, just like high from the tour, you know, maybe I drank too much. And then I'm coming home, drying out a little bit, you know what I mean? And, you know, it was difficult. It was funny, my wife, Stephanie, I came home one time and I was forgetting to like, not pick up the kids, but I was forgetting to do things because I was so accustomed to having master tour or a day sheet or just somebody telling me what to do.
Yeah.
You need to eat breakfast at this time. This is what time we load in. This is lunch. This is sound check. This is show. Like, you're spoon-fed all the information when you're on tour. So when I came home, she started making me day sheets. And it worked. It was like, pick up your daughter, go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Don't forget to pick her up from practice or whatever.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. I'd have these little day sheets on the kitchen counter in the morning, and it totally worked. It totally helped me.
Yeah, when we do these runs, like Rebecca will send out the final PDF like the night before.
Yeah.
And she'll go, okay, here's the dogs, here's where all the drop-offs are and everything. And then I just like immediately start cutting and pasting into my calendar.
Right.
And like on my calendar on Outlook. And then I put in the addresses and everything. Because on the day of, I don't want to be like looking over the sheet. I just want to like look at my Outlook and go, okay, we just left the pilot at Weed at, you know, whatever, like at 4 o'clock. And like, okay, like my next thing is I'm going to that address in Medford and just hit it and then opens Google Maps and, you know, and just like, but I have to like build the day ahead of time.
Right.
Because I don't want to be like constantly like looking at the run chat that's happening in Messenger.
Right.
There might be someone who doesn't use Facebook Messenger, so they're chatting with me on text. Then I've got a PDF that has like the master sheet. And it's like, it's just too much, like, you know what I mean? It's like, I need all that info consolidated in, like you said, like a day sheet. I need it in one place,
right,
where I can just start my day and like that's my reference, you know. And so, I totally understand it.
You're self-TMing.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, it's the only way on days that are like this hectic when there's so much stuff to get done. Yeah, I think that's. I think also too that, you know, going to what you're saying about how it's easier to leave and it's harder to come home because there's still a lot of stuff that you like. So many things happen so fast on tour that it really, like, even when it's like, even if you have a whole year touring cycle with the same people and the same crew members and the same band and whatever,
yeah,
every single tour is its own little pressure cooker, yeah, of like intense experiences and obstacles that people have to overcome together. And there's so many things that like, yeah, even though people would think, well, I've tried to explain to people, like literally every time you go out on a tour, like you come back a slightly different person.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, like, well, but you're just going back out with your same buddies that you were out with a month ago. Like, how is that any different? It's just like they don't really understand that it's like every time there's like these unique new set of challenges of like, you know, making it all happen. And so I think that like every time you come back, like you need a certain amount of downtime to just like process
and decompress
and like file everything away mentally and just sort of like put it all into perspective and kind of get a handle on it, because like maybe there's some things that didn't go well on that tour and that you need to kind of like regroup and rethink about like how you're going to address or tackle certain things on the next leg of the tour, like whatever the thing happens to be. And what's difficult about that I think, again, also people may not grasp, is that when you talk about the funneling of who kind of naturally self-selects to end up in this industry, I think that you're going to tend, for people who all of us, our jobs are not, we're not front of stage, we're not on stage performing.
Yeah.
So you're going to have people who are creatively inclined, they want to be part of artistic and creative things, but they might lean more towards being introspective and sort of quiet and, you know, and more reserved or whatever, you know?
Right.
So they're a bit more introverted,
yep,
as an overall personality type.
Yep.
But you're in this sort of pressure cooker situation where you're working with a lot of other people. You're traveling in a confined space because you're either like flying to gigs or you're taking a bus or a van or whatever. And so you never really get a break from other people. So when you have a whole bunch of people that are introverts who are forced almost into like a slightly more extroverted role in a way. Yeah. It's like when you finally come home, you're just like, oh, I just want fucking peace and quiet. Like I just need to like turn my brain off for a little bit, you know? And that's a really, really hard, like you said, it's way harder to come home than it is to like leave and go back and start the next big adventure.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's the fact that so many of us are naturally more introverted, you know?
Yeah, I tend to agree. And then we have these like really intense shared experiences that we're forced into, you know? I think that there's been a few tours where I had the luxury of extending, at the end of the tour, I had the luxury of extending my stay by a day or two before I came home, and I found that very helpful.
Yeah.
Because I could just have some peace and alone time, some me time before I, you know, and gathered myself together before I go back to my family.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and when you told me about what the Roadie Clinic is doing and the fact that they're like building out a facility,
right,
and that they have a place where like if a person's really having a crisis and needs to like take a break or get off of a tour, or if a person needs a place, an interim stop where they can go somewhere and get help, like not just staying in a hotel room for a couple extra days and then going home, but going somewhere where they can have like, there's like 12-step meetings available, and there's like, you know, there's like counseling available, and it's like, that's incredible. It's absolutely incredible that there's, you know, something like that that's geared towards someone who, you know, again, like might be just not in the right frame of mind and like really needs that buffer zone before they actually have to go home and interact with their family, and, you know, or whatever. Or maybe they don't go home with family at all, and maybe that's part of the problem, is that they, you know, maybe they're like, don't want to go home and just be like alone or whatever, you know, because then they know that maybe they'll start drinking too much or something, you know, and they just need to like find some way to buffer that, you know, in between the days of bus, and you always wonder if that's a band. Well, that's more of an RV.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of things there that are not obvious to people that are outside of the industry, which is why, against the backdrop of, you know, facilitating dog rescue and doing all this kind of stuff, which is its own like emotional like reward and everything. It's like it's its own good thing to be doing.
Right.
But to also like be able to make this like, okay, like let's get touring people in the van and let's talk about touring, let's talk about the challenges and whatever, so that like these conversations can be out there on YouTube or on Facebook or whatever, and it's like in the ether, and it's like people can find that stuff, and you know, because there's always new people coming into the industry, and like you don't always necessarily have like a mentor to kind of like explain to you like, hey, there's going to be some real like challenges here. And I don't mean like the challenges of like, you know, oh, tomorrow you're going to be in a venue with wacky electrical issues or whatever.
Right.
I mean like the challenges of like, it's such a all-encompassing lifestyle, and there's this sort of like forced intimacy of like you're living in confined quarters with all these people and like in a van and a bus and sharing hotel rooms and stuff, and like, you know, there's just a lot of just really intense emotional stuff that happens.
It's refined trauma bonding.
Yeah. Yeah, there was in the documentary about Pat Spurgeon from Rogue Wave, the documentary about his kidney transplant.
Yeah.
There's a great scene where they're interviewing all these different performers that came through, and I think it was at the Independent, that they were doing a fundraiser benefit thing for him, and it was Ben Gibbard from Death Cab. They're talking to him, and he's talking about it. He refers to touring as he says, you know, like the bonds that you share with people when you've toured with them. As he said, it's like war buddy. It's like they become like your war buddies without the violence.
Right.
Hopefully, without the violence. You know, but it is. It's kind of like that. You come back with this like sort of bunker mentality, or like a foxhole mentality of like you know, like you feel like you've been out there in the trenches, like, you know. You know, and you come back with these bonds with people that, you know, it's like war buddies without the violence, you know, is a pretty good way of encapsulating it.
Well, Ryan George over at This Tour Life and his associates when they put out that that questionnaire that right at the start of the pandemic. It was the questionnaire that was sent out to all touring individuals, and basically like asking, do you ever feel depressed? Do you feel anxiety? Do you have substance issues? You know, and asking about their mental health and well-being. I mean, the stats that came back were staggering, and it really showed how much help we need in the touring industry. But there had up to that point there hadn't been any research done, and the closest research that they could find that was parallel to what we experience on the road, the closest research that they could find was, guess, the military.
Right.
You know, and because you know the military spent millions of dollars researching, you know, well-being of their soldiers. But I found that to be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're kind of, you know, it's such an unusual fringe community. You know, it's like that people who are out touring for a living and doing that. It's, I mean, there's a sort of glamorizing of it, and there's like a certain coolness factor, of course, you know, that makes it look really romantic and glamorous and exciting and everything.
Right.
But it can also be its own weird bubble that insulates you from not only a kind of like reality in a way, but also insulates you from, or it sort of cuts you off in some ways from being able to like really get help, you know?
Right.
And so, and I think too, a lot of people that are experiencing those problems, like, you know, a lot of people like don't really have another thing that they're going to fall back on.
Right.
And so it's such a lifestyle, and touring is like the first, I'd say the first year and a half after I decided to get off the road was like legitimate identity crisis. Like, I was legitimately like, if I'm not out touring with bands and doing this amazing, cool, exciting thing, like, I don't, like
who am I?
Who am I? Like, what's my next phase of my life? Like, what am I going to do next? And I mean, it was like that first year to year and a half, I was like massively depressed and really, really struggling to figure out, like, you know, like, I knew my time had come where I was like, there's things I want, other things I want to do that I'm not going to be able to do if I keep touring.
Yeah.
And there were like financial reasons and other things in that era of the touring industry that made the decision relatively easy for me to say, okay, it's time for me to like move and start like doing a new thing. I don't really know exactly what that thing was. And yeah, so much of a person's identity can get tied up in the touring stuff that like, you can see where if someone's having a crisis, or they're having issues with their mental health, or they're having issues with like substance abuse or whatever, that they're not going to want to say anything about it.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to suddenly get a reputation of like, oh man, I'm going to start getting, like, I could get fired from this tour.
Right.
If I open up and say this, like, you know, that might freak people out, and they might boot me off the tour, and then other people, if the management company gets word of it, they'd be reluctant to hire me again for these other acts or whatever. You know, like, there's a lot of, you know, I think people could be like worried about the repercussions, and that's why it's so great that there's the emergence of somebody like the Roadie Clinic to say, no, look, we gotta be honest about this. Is like endemic to this industry and the kind of people that are in it, and so we need to like talk openly about it, you know, and not just you know, not be ignoring it or sweeping it under the rug, you know.
Right.